How are nation states crafted? How are nation states created? So, if a nation state is created, can a nation state be dismantled? What would be the reasons to dismantle a nation state? What is the process? What is the legalities? What constitutes the tipping point that a nation state needs to be dismantled? So, my thoughts. What would be the steps to dismantling Zionist Israel? Other than you would start, I guess, with reinstating that Zionism is a hate group or a terrorist group, and that was probably going to go through the United Nations, similar to that it did in whatever it was, 1982 or something, that lasted till 1999 or something. Google that one. When Zionism was designated as hate speech or a hate group, then I would anticipate that it would involve all nations under the UN or all nations cutting all financial, economic, diplomatic, cultural and sporting ties. I guess there'd have to be a huge element of that. There would have to be an element of cutting all arms sales and that kind of thing. There'd have to be expelling of the ambassadors of Israel in the country that you're in, and then the withdrawing of your ambassador. For us, it's Amir Maimon, to kick him out and to bring Ralph King back to Australia. What are the other things that would involve dismantling a country? You'd have to look at what happened to Nazi Germany after World War II and Fascist Italy after World War II, how they were disbanded. You would have to look at the examples of what happened to former Yugoslavia to see how those nations were separated, to see how the end of a nation can come into play, because clearly nations come into play, so nations going out of play have to have a process that we have to be able to enact. Clearly it's not going to happen under the pathetic Labor Albanese government here in Australia, so we will have to do our damnedest to get rid of them politically and get in independents, green and teals, so that we can actually have some politicians that are not bought. Because isn't it interesting when you look at politicians over the trajectory of their career, and you can see at a certain point that they have changed because the money has got to them, the power has got to them. It has been completely disappointing to see what has happened to the Australian government, the current Australian government, where Penny Wong, as a as an Asian immigrant background, as an LGBTQ woman, you would anticipate, because her trajectory has been so progressive, that she just becomes a Zionist stooge, and it has just been humiliating to watch her debase herself. How are we going to dismantle Zionist Israel? There has to be a political way. It has to be both national and it has to be international. The UN is going to have to step up at some point, because of the 162 nations or whatever, most of them are now global southern nations, nations from the global south, so that it should be pretty easy once you get rid of the veto by America, that you can actually start making some laws, strategies that are going to benefit everybody and not just the white supremacists that are supporting or supported by Zionist Israel. I was talking to somebody yesterday and I said, well, there's no other white ethno state in the world, and she goes, Poland. Was it Poland? Anyway, she said one of the European nations. So I'm going to have to investigate that one a little bit more. But in reality, look at every other nation in the world. It's multicultural. Even those nations that were forged on colonialism and there was annihilations of First Nations, like here in Australia, like in India, like in Canada, like in America, all of those nations still are multicultural. There are essences within those states that the white supremacists are trying to grasp a hold of. And here in Australia, we had a diabolical political program that was white nationalists. In the White Australia policy back in the clearly early 1900s. And we're hopefully moving away from that, and we are far off from where a country like New Zealand is, for example, moving forward with integrating our First Nations people. Getting back to Zionist Israel, it was created. It can be dismantled. End of story. You cannot have this blatant genocide. And I am still stunned that there are people that are supporting this, that are trying to whitewash it, that the both sides are, what about October 7? What happens about the 75 plus years before that? And getting back to 1882 when the Zionists started, it was secular, it had nothing to do with the Holocaust, and now the Holocaust, capital H Holocaust, has been hijacked to craft what is currently Zionist Israel. And I had another conversation with somebody else yesterday, and we were having the conversation about how after 75 years of multiple generations of these people that are now so bloodthirsty, you've got children, young children being crafted just to go into the military. You've got generations crafted from birth to kill somebody else. That is what they are. All of their childhood is governed towards going towards having the annihilation of the Palestinians. It seems insane that their education, that they go over to Dachau and Auschwitz to drape themselves in the flag, and then they have the paramilitary stuff that they do during their senior school years before they go into the military at 18. Their entire life is directed towards the killing of other human beings. No humanitarian concept within any of it from what you can see. And when you listen to that woman, Weiss, that settler woman who, she said, what are the statements? She said something like, my husband kept saying to me, why do I keep saying this over and over to my sons? And I said, because if I don't brainwash them, they will not know how to behave. She would have to be one of the millions of insane Zionists. So it's really interesting. You've got to watch what they say. You've got to listen, because they are telling you what absolute evil nasties they are. This is my thoughts. Somehow we've got to dismantle Zionist Israel.